we're going to go ahead and actually start it. So welcome. First of all, welcome to the first enrichment elective at ProCon 21. It's the first time we're doing this, so very, very exciting. I'll check in a moment. This enrichment elective is Jewish learning for the sake of community building. If that is not what you were looking for, this is your moment. Go back to Spot Me and select the session you actually were looking for. But I'm hopeful that that was the session you wanted and that you ended up in the proper Zoom room. My name is Sue Gelsey. I'm the Chief Program Officer at JCC Association of North America. And joining me today is my colleague, Andy Meiselas, who's the Director of Special Projects at JCC Association. We are both listed as co-hosts or hosts on the participant list, so our names are towards the top of the list. If you have any question or any concerns during the course of our session today, go ahead and chat one of us privately and we will do what we can to help you out. As you can see, this session is being recorded. We hope you stay on camera and are in dialogue with us through this session. If you prefer to not be on the recording, you could go ahead and close your camera or stop your video, but please stay active with us during the session in other ways. You'll also see that we have the live transcript of closed captioning playing. If you can disable that if that is a problem for you. Otherwise, we hope it can be helpful for those people that need that assistance. And beyond the closed captioning, we also aspire for this the whole ProCon to be an inclusive, welcoming space for everyone. So as I said before, if there's anything that Andy or I could do to help you along those lines, please let us know. Specifically, as far as being inclusive, we welcome you to change your name in Zoom. You could hit the three little buttons at the upper right-hand corner of your box to rename yourself or find yourself in the participant list. Please put in your first and last name and the organization that you work for. Most of us are JCCs, but go ahead and change that organization. And then we welcome you to put in your preferred pronouns, your personal pronouns, if you choose to do so also in your name. I think those are the big ones. The other major thing I want to say before we welcome on our speakers, one additional acknowledgement to our sponsors. We have 35 sponsors who have made this entire conference possible. Their generosity has made it possible that this conference has been offered at no cost, $0 to any person and to any JCC. So it is with great gratitude to them for making that possible. I encourage you to visit them on Spot Me in the vendor hall page. And I encourage you to visit them during the live session. We have one more live session with our vendors tomorrow at 1:45 Eastern. And that is all my welcoming notes. And now we get to what you actually came for, which was not me. It's a great honor to welcome these exceptional professionals to join us today, where we will explore how, if the JCC Talmud class can be as effective in building community as a basketball game. We will hear from Zoe Fertik and Tova Birnbaum from their own experience with JCC programming and how they discovered for themselves the potential for community building through Torah learning. And they know their success can be replicated at JCCs across North America. Zoe is the Associate Director of Jewish Content at the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto, and her work at the Oshman Family JCC is in partnership with Binah, the Jewish Movement for Social Change. Previously, Zoe founded an immersive Jewish learning program at Binah called Beit Midrash Tel Aviv, or TLV. Tova Birnbaum is the Director of Jewish Content at Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto. She was born in Bnei Brak and was one of the founders of the Binah secular yeshiva in Tel Aviv. You see the thread here? I had the privilege of learning with Tova in the inaugural cohort of the Mandel Executive Leadership Program, and now I have the privilege of sharing both Tova and Zoe with you all. I give you the stage.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you to ProCon. Thank you to everybody. I'm Zoe. That's my colleague, Tova. Tova, you can wave hello to everybody. Nice.
Hello, hello.
Hi. And we are from the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto. It's a lot of fun. Actually, right when Sue told all of you to change your names, I was starting to like watch the participant list and seeing where all of you are from. So it's actually it's such a treat to get to talk to people all around the States and to get to like actually face to face with our JCC colleagues from around America. So I'm really happy to see all of you here. You're welcome to turn on your videos so that we can see your faces. And even if you can't turn on your video, if we say something that you super love or you super hate, just turn on your video for a second and give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and it'll be exciting for us to see your reaction. So feel free to participate as much as you're able. So Tova and I called this session Jewish Learning for the Sake of Community Building. And our subtitle for this session was something along the lines of Jewish learning is not the ends, it is the means. And we're going to talk today about how we, in our experience, have been able to create Jewish learning experiences that cultivate and foster community building in ways that we think are as successful or more successful than what you might typically think of as a community building exercise. So that is our title of this session. And obviously our title is a little bit of like a leading the witness situation, because it's very clear what our opinion is and what our experience has taught us. So spoiler alert, we think it works. And so we want to tell you a little bit about how we've done it, why we do it this way. And we're also extremely excited to offer an opportunity to hear from you and to interact with you about ways that you can also replicate this however you see fit for the communities that you all work with in your local JCCs and elsewhere. So in order to sort of wet the whistle a bit and to warm up and to hear from you as just a start, a pinprick, Tova and I are interested in asking you to think of a time. Think of a time. This is how prompts always go. Think of a time where for you, in your experience, either as a participant or as a facilitator, when was a time that you can think of that Jewish learning and community building were one and the same? When was Jewish learning and community building one and the same? When were they woven together in your experience? And I just want to clarify, I'm not talking about ritual here. I'm not talking about like that awesome time you went to services and you made a friend. I'm not talking about a ritual experience. I am talking about learning, like books open. When was Jewish learning and community building one and the same for you? And I think we're 25 here in the room. I think people can raise their hand if they want to. And Andy, maybe you can unmute folks if their hands is raised. Or if you're not comfortable, just put something in the chat and I will read it out loud if you type it. So take a second. When was Jewish learning and community building one and the same for you? Think of a time. Share a time. I see a Todd. Is that a Todd raising his hand? Hooray for Todd. Thank you, Tucson. Dun, 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 dun. Tell us.
I think Jewish learning and community building always go hand in hand, because I think the foundation of who we are as an organization lives inside the words that we learn. So regardless of whether it's in the health center or in the early childhood center, it all starts with the foundation of who we are, not what we do.
Oof, who we are, not what we do. Someone write that down. Who we are, not what we do. Okay, great. Lauren wrote in the chat, our travel seminar to the Jewish South, Charleston and Savannah, which is a trip I really want to take. I would love to learn about the Jewish community in Charleston and Savannah. Lauren, if you have anything to add, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat about what it was about that travel seminar that linked learning and community building for you in that experience. I'd love to hear if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was led by one of our very cherished educators, and then also at the time our director of our adult Jewish learning department. who is also a rabbi. And so together they led a group of about 25 through, and there was a class portion that took place ahead of time, but also a lot of conversation that took place at the different sites that they visited, but at the same time, a lot of bonding and community building at the different sites that they went to, and over dinners where they would talk about education and Judaism, but at the same time just got to know one another throughout those conversations.
Gosh, I'm so struck by what a good example this is, because obviously travel is like just a unique opportunity to have an immersive experience with people that you don't know and to open your eyes to something that you didn't know before. So travel is such a good example of when this is particularly sort of like ripe, right? When this combo can really flourish. So thank you for that example. I'd love to hear one more. Oh yes, Jill, good. You're our third time's a charm. Tell us.
So for me, I apologize. My husband and I are both on Zooms at the same time.
I get it.
I think for me, it was going back many years while I was in BBYO, in Jewish Youth Group. And I went to international summer program, and it was having Jewish learning with my cohort of teens from all around the world, and the impact that had on me as a youth. And for me, my desire to continue my Jewish learning, my Jewish identity growing up and, becoming a young adult and even now as a parent.
Oh, I have to say, shameless pitch. I think BBYO is one of the best examples of this. I was an educator on their international summer learning program, which is now called Kala. I don't know if it's the same as what you are talking about, but
my daughter was supposed to go last summer, and obviously we know what happened. She just finished her term on the regional board. So yes,
it's just an
bittersweet
example of making friends, connecting to others through experiences that are primarily about learning, and even specifically Torah learning. BBYO check plus. If you can hear me, I'm giving you a shout out. Okay, great. Fantastic. So wow, it's really interesting because I have three totally different examples that are all some version of this combination of community building and learning, each unique, each special in their own way, but they're different. And I think Tova and I are also going to talk about throughout the session ways that we do programming that also show this combo in different ways. So thank you for, guys, exactly as I said, wetting the whistle for us. Tova, I'm going to pass to you so you can help frame a little bit for everybody what we mean and what we're talking about and what we're pulling on when we talk about community and learning.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you all for choosing this elective and for being so engaged. And I love the stories that were shared so far. We're going to talk about Torah learning as a means and not an end. And this is something that you kind of need to think about for a second. First of all, from my background, as Sue shared with you, I come from a very traditional background, and Torah learning is the end. Torah is the end. So really challenging that and saying, well, our job is to build community. We work as a community center, and we can do folk dancing, yoga, and Torah learning to connect people, each one with their own way. It's not a very easy thing for some people to stomach, but I want to start with connecting us to the holiday that we are about to mark in 2 days. So Zoe and I joked we can't have this session without actual learning, even for just 30 seconds. So if we look at the Talmud and we kind of look for the reason of what is this holiday Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, there's a lot of different reasons, but here is one of them. They said Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students from Gvat to Antipatros, and they all died in one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. Here you have Torah learning and community. And the story of the students of Rabbi Akiva is about, well, what is more important, Torah, or how do you relate to a person that is next to you and maybe needs your attention? So we see that tension, this paradigm questioned and dealt with throughout our history and the cultural creation. And we want to really bring it to the JCC world. And we will start with ourselves. How did we come up with this, we think, successful way of building community? Zoe, do you have a story to share with us?
Obviously. So I want to tell a story to all of you about my own personal experience in coming to understand and appreciate the ways that Jewish learning and community building are connected and symbiotic and mutually reinforcing. And the best example I have of that is when I had my first interest in Jewish learning. And I wanted to study. And I went away for a summer to do Jewish learning intensively. And I went by myself, and I didn't know anybody else there. And I was planning on learning from morning to night, and that was the purpose. I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to have an intensive Jewish learning experience. But Jewish learning is structured so that you can't avoid other people. There's something called chavruta, which is learning with a learning pair. And what I discovered by doing text study with a chavruta, with a learning partner, is that over the course of our studies, I was learning as much about her as I was about the text. And even more than that, I was learning that the text itself didn't have anything to say it didn't have a point of its own. It was there in order for me to see her perspective on the text, to share my perspective on the text, and for us to connect to each other through our attempt to understand the other's perspective. Sitting with a group of people and doing learning, what I discovered is that the texts were there to foster relationship building. I was doing this text study in order to get to know those around me and to learn how to appreciate the multiple perspectives that were being brought to bear on this text. The text only mattered because it was a reflection of the people around me, and the people around me, I felt so close to them because I got to know them in a way that was intimate and deep and thought-provoking and rich in a way that I could never have experienced over coffee or a smoothie. And that's when everything clicked into place for me, because I realized that Torah learning, which of course I was so interested in and I wanted to do and is always so exciting, was really there in order to connect me to others. And I realized that I wanted everybody to experience this, how to be connected to other people through deep, intimate Torah learning experiences. So that was me, an interest in Jewish learning that brought me to an appreciation for community building. What about you, Tova?
So we can share here, don't tell anyone. When Zoe and I try to explain what we do, in a minute we will share a few slides of how we try to really put things in like equations and to understand it and quantify it. We play this game of I wear the community hat and Zoe wears the learning hat. We have a third piece in this triangle, a dear colleague, Luba Palant, who wears the social justice hat when it's part of the conversation. So I'm going to share a story that is actually the opposite. So Zoe, you just shared the story about how it was all about the learning, but you realized that it's actually a community builder. I want to share a story about a community building program. It was all about, just about community building. And my example is Shavuot celebration at the Israeli community in Palo Alto. So I started my career at Oshman Family JCC at the Israeli department. It is called ICC, Israeli Cultural Connections. We did holiday celebrations. We did Shavuot. And then at some point, by the very pioneering and the like brave and courageous leadership of community members, they suggested, let's do serious learning. because this is Shavuot, and we are inspired by the beautiful tikkunim that we see all over. Tikkun Shavuot is like a spiritual, intellectual night, in the night of Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot. It's coming up actually, May 16th. And basically, it took 10 years. I was part, like I kind of joined in the middle, but it took many years until the Israeli community in Palo Alto is a place of chidushei Torah on a daily basis, meaning new Torah is coming out of that community on a daily basis. For a variety of sociological reasons that I'm not going to talk about now because this is not the focus of our conversation, but pure new Torah that is influencing the way people think about themselves and about Judaism is coming out of that specifically Shavuot celebration, which is the iconic event, but generally. So those two stories about Zoe's personal process of understanding how learning is community, and for me, how community is learning, if we choose so, really can lead us into what are the two concepts we want to share with you today. What are they, Zoe?
Awesome. So if Tova comes at this from one direction and I come at this from the other direction, but both of us care about creating some sort of balance between Jewish community building and Jewish content, that is what we're going to talk about today. So thank you everybody for indulging our introductions. And now we are in the meat of our session, which is about the balance between these two values and these two programmatic elements. Parts of a program that are about community building, parts of a program that are about Jewish content, and how do you keep these two things in balance so that they're both happening at the same time and mutually reinforcing each other. And we're also going to talk about Jewish learning at our JCC, and hopefully also at JCCs in general, which we think are just a perfect place to do this kind of program for a variety of reasons, which we will discuss. So in order to do that, I want to tell you a little bit about our work. And our work takes place at the Oshman Family JCC, but I will reveal my cards a little bit here and tell you that my position, if you were listening carefully to my introduction, my position is actually a partnership position. So I work at the Oshman Family JCC in Palo Alto, but my position is a partnership between the Palo Alto JCC, Oshman Family JCC, and Bina, the Jewish Movement for Social Change, which is based in Israel. And Bina is it's literally what it's called, a movement for social change in Israel. They're working to really offer opportunities for social justice work and social activism in Israel. And one of their pilot programs is something that you could have possibly heard of, or if you haven't heard of, it might raise an eyebrow for you because you're like, what? That's a paradox. But one of their major programs is called the Secular Yeshiva. And both Tova and I have experience at Bina's Secular Yeshiva in Tel Aviv. And through the partnership between the Oshman Family JCC and Bina, we have been able to, and I can barely believe it, it's so amazing even every time I say it, we have been able to create the Secular Yeshiva of Palo Alto. Here's a little bit of a taste of like some visuals of our programming, and you can see people learning and celebrating. This is actually from a Shavuot event that we hosted 2 years ago in Palo Alto. You'll see here we have experiences that look more like a meditation yoga class. We have experiences that look more like a classroom setting, experiences that look more like a lecture. We are hosting events under this partnership of the Oshman Family JCC and Bina, the Jewish Movement for Social Change, under the umbrella of what we're calling the Secular Yeshiva in Palo Alto. And these programs are all of them at the Secular Yeshiva Palo Alto, an expression of this balance between programs that are meant for community building and programs that are meant for deep, serious Jewish learning and Jewish content. Each of our programs really represents this balance between these two values. And that being said, we don't always hit it straight down the middle. It's a spectrum. Some of our events sort of lean a little bit more heavily on the community building side. Some of our programs lean a little bit more heavily on the content side, but Tova and I, every single one of the programs that we put on for the partnership between the JCC and Bina, we are focusing deeply and paying attention to the ways that these programs must express both of these values. There must be a community building aspect and there must be a content aspect. And each of our programs is going to land somewhere along that spectrum. So Tova, maybe you can sort of clarify how that spectrum might look.
Yes, thank you so much. So I want to share that this structure, it was actually clarified for ourselves during the pandemic. So I'm sure for so many of you, you kind of revisited your mission and you revisited the essentials. Everything was a year ago about essentials and everything was about, okay, what is it really that I'm doing here? And for us, when we had to choose what programs we're keeping, what programs we're moving online, what programs do we have to put on hold, we asked ourselves, is this about the content or is this about the community building? And if it's both, and they are all both, where do we put them on the spectrum? And once we put them on that spectrum, we know how we want to design, structure, and lead the experience. So let's talk about the two poles, community building and content. The content one, we have two very good examples that Zoe will talk about in a minute, because that's like out there. People will consume the content, which was carefully curated and made, but we will probably not meet or interact with most of them. And we know that it's about the content. So Zoe, please share with us a little bit about those two programs that are in that side of the, like this pole of the spectrum.
Great, yeah, so on the very, very, very edges, on the content side of the spectrum, on the very edge, I'll show you quickly two examples of this. These programs are content rich, learning deep, they're serious, they're awesome, but they're also all online. We don't interact with anybody. You can access it on your own time and you will have a learning experience and you might feel connected to the facilitator or to the presenter, but you're not having an interaction with folks who you're learning with because you're probably learning by yourself. So two examples of this, Tova and I have a weekly show that we broadcast on Facebook Live. It's called Holidays for Heretics, and Tova and I run through the entire Jewish calendar week by week, and we have so many episodes. They air on Wednesday mornings, then they're all put online so you can watch them on demand, and Tova and I have just run through the entire calendar, and you can watch it whenever you want. So you might feel connected to us and you might feel connected to the holiday and therefore the people around you in your house or the people you celebrate a holiday with by deepening your understanding of the holiday through watching Holidays for Heretics, but you are not part of the Holidays for Heretics community. There is no Holidays for Heretics community. Similarly, we launched a program called Text People, which is short Jewish learning videos about 3 texts. We launched one about the binding of Isaac around Rosh Hashanah. We launched one about the Megillah around Purim, and we launched one about the plagues around Pesach/coronavirus. And these projects, the Akedah project, the Megillah project, and the plagues project, are collections of videos that you can watch to explore these texts and learn about these texts from a variety of perspectives. All of these videos are on demand. You can watch them on their website where they're hosted, and they're all available for you to watch on your own. And therefore you might feel a connection to any one of these presenters, and you might learn more about where these presenters come from through watching these videos. But you're similarly to Holidays for Heretics, you're not part of a Akedah project community just by watching these videos. So these two examples, Holidays for Heretics and the Text People projects, these are all high level content. They are like super far on the spectrum on the content side, but they aren't necessarily all that community binding unless you yourself are self-motivating to do something communal based on the learning that you experience from watching these videos. Now, by contrast, we have polar opposites on the other side of the spectrum. We've got community projects that are super, super, super community binding, but not necessarily really serious Jewish learning. So Tova, do you have a good example of that?
Yes, absolutely. I will share about our women singing circle. But before that, I want to say that the two examples that Zoe just showed, I'm sure you noticed there are not only JCC logo there. There are other organizations that we collaborate with all the time. And Jewish Live, Judaism Unbound, and 929, Bina, of course, and many others. And some would argue, well, that's community building. We create community with all the professional Jews and we kind of hang out with them a lot. But I must say that we do have conversations about community building when we do frontal content. And we ask ourselves about that. Well, there is potential for community building, but when we had to kind of decide where to put our effort, we made a decision. So Dan Libenson, who is leading Jewish Life, said, okay, let's create something. And we were about, okay, this is content we are doing local community building. And this is what we're focusing on. And let's talk about what it means to create a global, flourishing community that talks about heretic holidays, for example. The other part of the pole of the spectrum, Allowed. We're very excited about that program. It launched maybe a year before the pandemic. Women meeting once a month in a nice room, sharing a meal, sharing stories, sharing personal stories, celebrating personal moments, and singing, and dancing. So this is really a program that it was created by a community member who had a similar experience in a different community. She said, well, you, Palo Alto, like to see other things and say, oh, we want one too, so let's have one too. And it was, I'm saying was because now we're redoing this on Zoom, but a very warm, physical experience of community. And yes, some songs were Jewish. Most songs actually were in English, in Yiddish, in Hebrew, in all different styles. We actually hired a musician who would come, especially would fly in for that. We once had money and flights. Now things are very different. But we would really, really, really think about that aspect intentionally, and very intentionally say, well, the Jewish part, we can be light about it because this is community building. So that's the other pole. And now we can focus, we're not going to talk about all programs. We just want to mention examples to demonstrate how we work on this spectrum. So why don't we, after going to the two poles, why don't we talk about the middle?
Great. So Tova and I run programs that obviously are on the two ends of this community content spectrum, but our programs, some of the programs that they just fill my heart are the ones that are smack dab down the middle. And Tova and I have two of those that we think are just bullseyes. So the first one I want to tell you about is called Judaism, the New Basics. And this is our weekly learning group. You can find links online, and I think Andy is posting some, but here's, for example, what we're doing right now in Judaism, the New Basics is a 6-week Talmud class, Talmud from the beginning, an introduction to the Talmud. Judaism, the New Basics is open to anybody. It meets on a weekly basis, but it is separated into mini units. So people can come sort of, oh, I'll just come for 6 weeks. I'm interested in the Talmud. I'll sign up for a 6-week class. But they don't know that they're going to get hooked in. They stay. So many people have just stayed. And basically now we have a core group that has been with us every week for 3 years since we started this program. And they're staying because the learning is great. And they're staying because now they feel connected to the Judaism New Basics community. And Tova and I always, our first priority is to have great learning, and great learning that is interesting and enriching and intellectually serious and takes people seriously. Even if they're at a beginner level, we want them to know that they are not beginners. And so that is always the first priority. But at the same time, we also make efforts during every class to foster community building. So what does that mean? It means asking people to share stories that we think might be relevant to the content. It means hosting holiday events that are just open to people who come to Judaism, the New Basics. So a sukkah party or their own Passover Seder, for example. It means having chavruta learning, where people in the room are learning with each other. And it also means follow-up from me and Tova to make sure that we are taking care of the people who are coming to our classes and keeping their interest, and creating the next series, the next little mini thematic unit as a way of sort of building on the interest of those who are in the class and who keep coming back to the class. So that is one of my favorite parts of the week. It is a true experience of a community that has formed through learning. And it is open to anybody. It is open to absolutely anybody. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but Tova, why don't you tell us about one other program that is a bullseye in our opinion?
So I want to tell you about Kol Isha, a woman's voice. I must say that when this name was given to me, I didn't choose it. I wasn't sure about it. And Kol Isha is kind of in the middle, but a little bit leading to the community building piece. And we know that. And that's a big piece for us. Before I talk about Kol Isha, I want to say that what we just heard from Zoe about us really thinking about community building while presenting very intellectually stimulating content, it's very hard because we have to be there, even if we're not presenting. We come to every program, both of us, and my husband is like, but you have a presenter that you hired and Zoe's there. Why are you going out again at night to be at work? Because of that, because it is not only about the content and what the presenter is going to present. Yes, it is super intentional and like high level, and it's about the people who we are going to see and offer them coffee and ask about them. And Zoe is amazing with doing those personal emails. We had very, very touching, moving moments for, we have a few people who are on their conversion journey, and we kind of were part of that, and we kind of, you know, we sent flowers after the mikveh ritual, and they're like blown away. They just came for a Talmud class. And for many of them, it really became a mini family, because for many of them, it was the first time to sit in a sukkah together, the first time to have a seder, and so on. And Kol Isha is that, but it's an 18-month program for women, and it is based on 3 pillars of women, social justice, and Jewish peoplehood. It started in collaboration with 2 other JCCs, one in Israel and one in Poland. Now, because of pandemic, it's a local group. And we do learning very seriously. we do community building very seriously, and we do social justice very seriously. Our colleague Luba Palant just joined, and Luba is the one who is wearing this social justice hat for all of us and is leading the very serious project that we are building with Kol Isha. So yes, it's very serious learning. The curriculum is there. When they start the program, they have a binder with all the content for 18 months. And we really, really emphasize that piece. And we built community because when we interviewed, in this program, you have to interview, to apply to interview, most people, when we ask them, well, why do you want to join Kol Isha? Most of them said, I just want women friends. I want Jewish women friends. And maybe it's not very politically correct to say it in this way, but this is what most of them told us. We are creating intimacy by using the tool of learning. And we actually say that we are creating intimacy together. Let's open our books. So this is Kol Isha.
Beautiful. And while Tova was talking, someone wrote into the chat, is the class, and I think you mean the new basics class, a formal part of a conversion process? And no, it's not. And I think this is, your question is spot on, because the conversion process has a lot to do with learning, and you have things you need to check a box and learn. And I think people come to new basics because they say, all right, I'm learning all these things during my conversion process, but like, I want a Jewish community. And we have this feeling in the classroom of like, oh, come in, you're part of us. What do you want to learn? What are you curious about? What angst are you bringing to the table? And there's a lot of room for that in a community space that perhaps there wouldn't be room for as part of a conversion process, where there's certain things you have to learn and an agenda that needs to get accomplished. So thank you for that question. And so just to build on what Tova was explaining about Kol Isha, part of what is so special about that experience is that you come into Kol Isha through an application process. You are committing to 18 months in advance. You know you're going to be part of an immersive experience with others. So the members of Kol Isha are like, they're ready. They are so ready to be part of a community. That's not necessarily the case with something like an open Wednesday class where you only have to come once if you want to because you're interested in tonight's topic randomly. So how is it that we make a classroom feel like a community building space? What are the principles of our classes that really lend themselves to fostering community building? And I say this like knowing that I'm talking to other professionals who are all community builders in our own ways with our own programs that are obviously about community building. And so this is sort of the moment that Tova and I want to go meta and say like, yes, we're all community builders, but like, what is it about learning in particular that is particularly apt for this community building effort that we're all a part of? So we follow a few principles. And they're pretty general, but I want to go through them one by one because they are important. And I will say again, I think they are particularly available at a JCC. There's something about a JCC that makes these five values possible to implement in a way that isn't necessarily true in other community spaces. So the first is that it's democratic, meaning we want to hear from everybody. We want everybody to participate. Your voice is meant to be heard. These are not all lectures. They're places where real conversation is happening. And if someone has a topic they're interested in, then they should tell us, and we're going to build a class based on what they're interested in. So we get to know everybody. We ask everybody to participate, and we ask everybody to tell us their interest so that we can tailor the class to the interest of the community members. 3, radically inclusive. We say radical not just because it's a buzzword, but because we literally mean radically inclusive. Everybody is welcome. We've got so many non-Jews. We've got people on the conversion process. We've got all ages. Like really, when I say all ages, I mean all ages. We have people who are local, we have people who drive an hour to come. And since we've been on Zoom, we have people from the East Coast. We had literally radically inclusive. We had a participant Zoom in for our Jewish philosophy session from the University of Cairo at 4 in the morning, his time, because he wanted to participate. He wanted to freshen up on modern Jewish philosophy. And so we had a participant from Cairo who was Zooming in at 4 in the morning. We mean it when we say no knowledge is required. And Tova and I are really testing that right now when we are doing an introduction to the Talmud class, because we are guaranteeing folks that they don't even have to know what the Talmud is. They do not have to have one letter of Hebrew familiarity, and we will be learning with them on the page of the Gemara. And that is extremely difficult for us to implement, and we are constantly getting better at it. And we really, really, really mean it. No knowledge required. But the flip side of no knowledge required is that we're not talking to you like you're a beginner. Tova always says we're in Silicon Valley, so we're constantly talking to geniuses. It's just that we happen to have a little bit more knowledge on this topic, but everyone in the room is smarter than we are. So we want to be intellectually respectful. We know that people might be a beginner. They might not speak Hebrew. They might never have ever seen a page of Talmud before, but they're a genius in their field. And so we want to have a serious class where we are having a conversation based in serious ideas and actually reading the text itself, the ancient texts themselves. So these classes are democratic, they're interest-based, they're radically inclusive, no knowledge required, and they are incredibly intellectually respectful of our participants. And we think that this is the special sauce, that if we can have a classroom that reflects these 5 values all the time, that we are going to be building programming that connects people to our tradition and connects people to each other in the process. Tova, what do you have to add?
So we have 9 minutes left, and we really hope Sue is very happy with me. So we really want to hear from you, either comments or questions. I do want to reiterate and re-stress what Zoe said about the role of a JCC. And I'm not going to go into the conversation of mandate and which lane are we swimming in, right? Synagogues, Jewish day schools, federation. JCCs have the ability to be whatever they decide, if they decide to do so. And I think that we all understand that. And once we create a conversation about that as colleagues, we can really help each other do that and say, well, I know that people want to learn, and I know that people do not feel comfortable in this or that space. And I know that walking into a JCC is so much easier. So I have responsibility. I feel, Zoe and I feel that we have responsibility to be a Jewish home for everyone, and especially those who do not feel that they have one. And we're very lucky and privileged to be JCC professionals and to really be able. And we also use the S word, secular. We didn't kind of talk about the whole content and baggage around that, because we brought this from Israel, but JCC secularity, or at least religious neutral, that's another important piece that should be part of that conversation. So because we are yes, we can build community right now, right? So if anyone has a question or wants to share a comment or something that has to do with your local community or your local programs that are kind of connected, please feel free to raise your hand virtually or physically, and we would love to hear you. And or we can grab
Luba,
questions.
don't kill me. Do not kill me, Luba. But somebody wrote in the chat that there's a tendency around religious learning to defer our voices to the more learned people. And Luba, you have experienced some of the Jewish learning that Tova and I created at the JCC, and you're a big part of putting that on, but you've also been somewhat of a participant. And I know that in the past, when you've been to learning experiences that are maybe from the more typical learned folks, you haven't connected. So maybe you could just give us a testimonial about what it is about this more democratic version and approach that has resonated for you.
Thank you for putting me on a spot. I was not prepared for this question. However, I completely agree with the statement that this particular style of learning actually helped myself a lot. I was never comfortable in a synagogue. I always felt like I don't fit with any movement. I didn't know much. I only knew that I was persecuted in Russia because I was a Jew in Soviet Union, with no knowledge what it was about. And so here I tried many different approaches, and the JCC, and I wouldn't say even in the JCC, it was very helpful for me in the past until Tova and Zoe started teaching this. And I think this is not about, this is everything that Zoe mentioned, but it's also an opportunity for us to discuss things in small groups, to have those Havruta conversations. And for when they hear our opinions, they don't necessarily dismiss it. You know, they support it. They say, and what else do you think about this? They connect it to our personal experiences and our hidden depth, and they bring it out of us in a very, very democratic environment. So I feel that this helped me tremendously, and having these people around me who feel the same, and connecting with those. I am a big part of Kol Isha, and I originally started a social justice part there, but I built my own relationships with these women because we learned together. And even though some of them were much more advanced and learned, we still were able to build connections. And that's because of this democratic and very open environment at the JCC with Tova and Zoe.
I can testify that when we just started Kol Isha and we were creating these giant binders, Luba said, well, don't make me a binder. I'm not going to do the learning with you. And when we started the project and learned together, after a few months, she was like, how come I don't have a binder? I need the text. So this is just an example that can happen everywhere and for everyone, really.
So Tova and I, first of all, I second that story, true story about Luba and the binder. But Tova and I and Luba, but we're available to you with any questions you have. We want to hear about your community. We want to be a part of whatever you need from us to create these kind of learning experiences and community building experiences in a way that works for you. Our emails are going to go into the chat. Our programs, so many of them are available online, or at least information about them is available online, so you can take a look. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be in collaboration with you, because we truly believe in the work we do, and we believe that JCCs and these types of open communities are the best place to do them. And Tova, do you want to give a final word here so that we're perfectly exactly ending on time?
I think we have time for one question, if there is one.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, before you sign off, I do want to throw a question out. There are many communities that don't currently have a culture of Jewish learning, or that's not part of what people in their communities turn to their JCC for. Where would a community like that start this journey?
You know, what I sometimes try not to do is to create hierarchy. So everybody loves to learn. Everybody can learn. Everybody is a learner. It's just a question about how do you think about it. So and again, this spectrum, we will never share it with our people. It is a working tool for us. And it doesn't mean that aloud singing circle, women singing circle is less important, impactful than the text people, for example. אם כבר it's vice versa. But if we want to use that spectrum and say, well, I think a program that will be located here on the spectrum, which is, yes, it's mostly community building. There will be some food and like, we'll work on that, and we will add the learning, and we will be intentional about it. Then there is a process, and the learners will come. They will come. There is no such thing as a community who doesn't want to learn. We just need to, the learners need to know about the opportunity, and they will come.
So I agree with everything Tova said, of course. And the only other thing I'd add is start exactly where it makes sense for you. Don't worry about where it is on the spectrum, and take it slow. We've been doing this every day for 3 years, and only now can we say we have a Talmud group. Only now can we say, wow, we had a whole cohort of Kol Isha, and we know that they have connected to each other. 3 years ago, we had other programs that were successful in their own way, and we've been building it slowly and organically based on what the people who are coming want, and based on strengthening the bonds between the people coming slowly. So that's the other thing. Don't rush it. Do not rush it.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer. I cut you off, Tov, if you had any concluding words, and then we could wrap it up.
Just to, we talked about the collaboration with Bina, which is a whole other conversation, but just to say that collaborations with not only local North American organizations, also from outside, to really think about community building in the peoplehood lens is also an amazing opportunity. And just to kind of mention that as well.
Well, thank you so much, Tova and Zoe. I personally loved this session. There was some gems I wrote down. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them, but I love them, and I look forward to quoting you in the future on the unique opportunity that JCCs have to leverage content for community in a way that is not currently the thinking. So thank you both for sharing your experiences and making yourselves available to professionals afterwards. Andy put the contact information in chat. Also, both Tova and Zoe are participants in this conference, not just speakers. So you could access them or connect with them on the SpotMe platform for further conversation as well. And as far as what's left in the conference, we still have so much more to go. I think we're just about at our official halfway mark in the professional conference. So we're crossing that together. The rest of today, we've got 2 more sessions on the schedule. From 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern is our JCC Excellence Showcase, where we're going to have the opportunity to hear from other JCC professionals about exceptional programs at their centers that can be replicated, just like this, can be replicated at your center. And not just programs, it could be leadership practices, marketing examples, a great assortment. You have 2 options, one from 4 to 4:30 and another from 4:30 to 5. Both those times are Eastern. And just so you know, we had over 60 submissions to our JCC Excellence Showcase. All of those submissions will be made available after the conference. But here's a chance to engage with a couple that we have selected for you to be highlighted today. And then at 5:15 Eastern time, we have our J Cafe, which is a social opportunity. We're using a totally different platform, not Zoom, not SpotMe, something called Kumo Space, which will give you an opportunity to talk in small groups, meet other people, hang out. You get a virtual glass of wine, super fun. We've used it a lot with our staff team. Again, we have a full day tomorrow. Tomorrow we start again with Mindful Motivators, another enrichment option, and then our final live virtual vendor hall before our closing movement moments. So lots more to come. Thank you all for joining this session. Thank you all for participating in the professional conference. And we look forward to seeing you the next few days. Thank you so much.